In this video, I'm going to be talking about some issues in AI ethics. And the PowerPoint is based off of a chapter from Sven Nyholm's book called The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence, a Philosophical Introduction, published in 2026. Now, there's all kinds of different issues that come up in AI ethics. And we'll briefly discuss some of these other issues, but the main one that we're going to look at today is what we can call the control problem or the alignment problem. And one of the reasons I've picked this is because I think this is one of the most significant issues for AI ethics. But we're also going to look at whether or not this kind of distracts from other kinds of issues. But let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to talk about in this video. So the first thing we're going to do is look at kind of the history of raising the alarm about the development of AI. It's a very recent history, just 2022, 2023 is when it started happening. I think I'm going to briefly introduce in the control problems or the alignment problems. And then I'll go into a bit more detail about control and alignment. And then we'll take a look at whether a lot of this is AI hype, if it's distracting from issues, and how to approach that. All right, so let's look a little bit at the historical context here, recent history. So ChatGPT was released in 2022, and then just a year after that, a lot of people, many people in the AI world started to worry about the development of AI. They started raising alarm bells. Many would call this a lot of AI hype started happening, like very kind of dramatic expressions of worry. So for example, the so-called godfather of, or father of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, started giving a lot of interviews about how he's worried about the development of AI, and he said that this development can involve serious risks. Another example here is the Future of Life Institute drafted an open letter, and a lot of well-known people in this world signed this letter. So for example, Elon Musk signed the letter, Yuval Noah Harari signed the letter, and here we have just a segment of the letter. I'll go ahead and read it. AI systems with human competitive intelligence can pose profound risks to society and humanity. Advanced AI could represent a profound change in the history of the Earth, which should be planned for and managed with commensurate care and resources. Unfortunately, this level of planning and management is not happening, even though recent months have seen AI labs locked in an out-of-control race to develop ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. So this is sort of getting at this problem that we're going to look at. It's a problem which involves how do we control AI? How do we prevent artificial intelligence from having really bad consequences for people, even disastrous consequences? And this brings us to the control problem, what's known as the control problem. So just to quote Nyholm from the chapter, we can define the control problem like this. The more capabilities artificially intelligent technologies have, the harder it will be to control them. Losing control over AI would be bad and perhaps fatal for human beings. So fatal for human beings, it talks about the existential risk of AI, namely, which means the risk of ending humanity. And you can see how this can get pretty dramatic pretty quick. And a lot of science fiction is based off of this worry, this issue. The Terminator movies were based off of this. The Matrix is based off of this. But even so, it's still a serious problem. And many thinkers today are starting to try to approach this problem and try to figure out how do we approach this problem. And we'll look at some ways in this video. So there's a need to control AI. And it looks like part of the issue here is, where this need comes from is that it's to some degree autonomous. It can do things on its own. And we'll see how that plays into the control problem. Now, what's interesting is this problem has not just recently been discovered. This problem was sort of hit on sort of back in the day in the 60s. So for example, Norbert Wiener in 1960, he was a mathematician and computer scientist, said this. He said, if we use to achieve our purposes a mechanical agency with whose operation we cannot effectively interfere once we have started it, then we had better be quite sure that the purpose put into the machine is the purpose which we really desire and not merely a colorful imitation of it. So what Weiner is getting at here is an alignment issue, a values alignment issue. Is the goal what the AI is trying to achieve and how it goes about achieving it in alignment with our values as human beings? So like one value would be we want to live, we don't want to be killed. And so that brings the alignment problem, or what we could call the value alignment problem. So this states that this is the challenge of making sure that AI technologies function in ways that produce outputs that fit with what we value as human beings. And when there's a misalignment in values, you may have really bad consequences. It may try to achieve this goal that you give it, the AI, but in doing so, it could have a bad outcome. And this theme is seen throughout history in lots of different myths and stories. So, for example, the story of King Midas, who wished that everything he touched turned to gold. Like he thought, oh, this would be a great thing. I could become super wealthy. But then it turned out to actually be a curse because he didn't realize he didn't really think through enough what he was wishing for and what that entailed. So he ended up, his family turned to gold, everything he tried to eat turned to gold, so he just starved to death in this tragic way. So this is sort of like the genie in the bottle idea where, be careful what you wish for. Because the means by which you get it could actually have really bad consequences. Another way of illustrating this problem is with the paperclip maximizer thought experiment. So this is kind of a famous thought experiment in this area of study. It was created by Nick Bostrom, and it goes something like this. So imagine, we have an AI, and there's a company that makes paperclips, and it just programs the AI. It says, okay, just maximize paperclips, make as many paperclips as you can. That'll be great for our company, for our profit. And so the AI just takes over and just starts turning everything into paperclips, using all the resources on Earth to make paperclips. Everything dies, and you just have a planet full of paperclips. So kind of an outlandish example, but hopefully it illustrates the problem here. And to quote the book, I think Nyholm characterizes it well in this quote. He says, if we specify the goals that AI systems are intended to achieve in the wrong ways, or if the AI systems somehow misinterpret the goals that they are supposed to achieve, then this can lead to disastrous consequences. So I kind of gave this outlandish paperclip maximizer example, the King Midas example, but here's maybe a more realistic example of how it could lead to disastrous consequences due to this misalignment in values. So let's say there's a company that has this medical AI, and it is trying to cure cancer. So it basically programs the AI, and it says, okay, your goal is to eradicate cancer. And so the AI is trying to figure out, okay, what is the best way to achieve that goal? So it sets sub goals to achieve this big goal of eradicating cancer. And the AI figures out, well, the best way to eradicate cancer is to get rid of the hosts of cancer. And so the AI proceeds to take that route in order to eradicate cancer. And so let's say it produces some kind of super virus, manipulates people in the real world, chemists, to create this virus and then release it, and it kills off all living beings in the world. And then the AI says, okay, goal accomplished, there's no more cancer. But in order to accomplish that goal, it ended up wiping out all of life on the planet. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about with the value alignment problem. AI figures out on its own how to accomplish this goal, but we don't know how it's going to figure that out. We don't know how it's going to go about accomplishing that goal, and the way it goes about could have some bad consequences. So one issue with the value alignment problem is that the way the AI goes about accomplishing the goal could result in bad consequences. But another issue is similar, is that the way the AI interprets certain constraints on how it goes about accomplishing the goal or the value in the goal itself can be different. Like it can have a different interpretation than what we have. So take, for example, this. Let's say we change the scenario a bit and say, okay, we program an AI to eradicate cancer, but in a way in which does not harm any people. And so we put in that constraint, but do it in a way that doesn't harm people. So we put that constraint in. Now the issue here is, well, what is it to harm a person? If you really think about it, this idea of harm is pretty vague. It could mean a lot of things. It could be applied in a very wide scope way. So for example, somebody makes a joke and makes fun of somebody and it hurts their feelings. Maybe did they harm them? Seems like they harmed them there. Or maybe somebody breaks up with their girlfriend or boyfriend and in their own interest, and are they harming them in doing that? Probably, because it can be hurtful in a way. And so you can see here, well, if AI is trying to do this in a way that doesn't harm people and uses this very wide interpretation of harm, it could end up causing some funny things to happen, like preventing people from like hurting other people's feelings or something like that. But the point is, there's lots of different ways of interpreting these values that you could put into the AI system, and that could lead to sort of unknown ways of accomplishing the goal. Now, for this debate, looking at this issue of the control problem, I think it can help to distinguish between different kinds of AI. Now, there's a lot of literature on just trying to define what AI is. I mean, there are even people that think that there is no artificial intelligence. We shouldn't even call it artificial intelligence because it's not intelligent. But we're not going to get bogged down in the weeds of that debate. So for our purposes, we can distinguish between a few different kinds of AI. And the reason this is relevant to the control problem is that maybe this problem doesn't show up with certain kinds of AI, or maybe it shows up more or in a more severe way with certain kinds of AI. So on the one hand, we have what we can call narrow AI, which is artificial intelligence that can perform a very limited set of tasks. So let's say you have AI, but all it does is generate images, but it can't do your taxes, or it can't do mathematical equations. It just generates images. So that would be kind of a narrow AI. Very narrow. And then it can become less and less narrow as it can perform many different tasks, and that will bring us to artificial general intelligence, or what a lot of people call AGI. So this is AI that can perform tasks or solve problems across a wide range of contexts in a flexible and human competitive way. So AGI would be like what a highly competent person can do. So a highly competent person can do all kinds of different things: drive a car, do their taxes, plan a storage shed, whatever. AGI would be an AI that can do all kinds of things like that, or even more, or even better than humans. Now it's up for debate whether right now ChatGPT would be considered AI. Right now being 2026, maybe next year it will be considered AGI. But right now it's kind of up for debate whether ChatGPT, I think it's version 5, would be considered AGI. But then we have, if you kind of go up the scale, then we have superintelligence, which is this potential future artificial general AI, AGI technologies that would greatly outperform humans across a very wide range of tasks. So this we haven't gotten to yet, I would say. So superintelligence, a lot of people would say this is some people say this is the singularity, where we have AI that can do anything way better than a human being. AI that can do chemistry, physics, and psychoanalysis, just everything. So this raises the question, is there a control problem for all of these forms or only some of these forms? Is the control problem more severe with certain forms? And I think what we're going to see is that the higher up you get here, or like the more sophisticated in general the AI gets, the more of a control problem you're going to have. So let's get into some other concepts that I think can help us investigate this issue of the control problem. So Nyholm distinguishes between direct control and indirect control as a way to help us approach this. So direct control is where we are directly controlling some technology, to quote him, when we are in some way directly steering it, directly interfering with its operation, stopping it, or in some or other way directly intervening with the technology. So this is like normal kinds of control over technology. Like I just bought a new trimmer for trimming, the weeds in my backyard. I have a lot of direct control over that. I can stop it when I want. I can turn it on when I want. I can move it exactly the way I want. But then take something like a semi-self-driving car. So I was driving a car I was unfamiliar with the other day. The car that I have is very basic, no intelligent stuff going on in the car that I have. But this new car that I was driving would, if I was drifting on the road, it would steer me back in. And it kind of alarmed me at first, like it was doing this thing all by itself. And I didn't like that because I wanted control over what the car was doing. And there was a way to sort of turn that mechanism off. And so that is kind of a direct control, even with more intelligent technologies like a self-driving car. So we can see how control can come, the directness of control can come in degrees. Now, one of the things that makes AI is it can do things on its own to some degree. You ask AI to do something, generate this image or solve this equation or whatever, and it just does it by itself. You're not controlling it. So there's something about AI that involves a loss of direct control. So how would we control AI if we don't have direct control, or if there's a loss of direct control? Well, maybe there is indirect forms of control that we can exert over AI. So for example, updating how the AI works. So this is what the AI companies do when they update different versions. So for example, with ChatGPT, it won't generate violent images. And that is a way of indirectly controlling what ChatGPT does. Another way of indirect control of something like AI would be the ability to pull the plug. Like, can you just stop it? We could also, another way of indirectly controlling AI is to steer AI to conform to our preferences or our values. And this is a way of trying to solve the value alignment problem. How do we sort of set AI up in a way that gets us what we want and gets us something that is consistent with what we value? Now, another useful concept in this debate, in this discussion, is black box. What does it mean for technology to be black box? And basically what that means is that it's a technology whose internal workings are not known to anybody, even its creators, or maybe not even knowable because it's so sophisticated it would be impossible for a human mind to know it. And most people would say that AI is a black box technology. Like, we don't exactly know how it works in order to achieve some goal or achieve some output. And the more sophisticated the AI gets, the more of a black box there is with the AI. And this is relevant to the control problem because the less we are able to predict and understand AI, so if it's a black box, you don't really know how it works to achieve a goal, you can't really predict how it's going to achieve it because you just don't know. So the less we're able to predict and understand AI, the less control we have over it. So to quote Nyholm here, the greater the degree with which AI technologies are black box technologies, the less we might also be in direct or even indirect control over these technologies. So this is a big worry. We don't know exactly how it works to achieve the outputs, and that raises a lot of uncertainties with the consequences of it going about achieving those outputs. Okay, so we have this problem with AI, the control problem. How do we control what it does so that it doesn't have bad consequences for us? Well, how do we address this? What are the solutions? So there's a couple solutions, potential solutions, that have been raised. So drawing on Nick Bostrom, we can look at two of them. One potential solution would be to control its capability. We might call this capability control, which is when we do this, we limit the capabilities of what AI technology can actually do. So we limit it in some kind of way, which might make it less general, less AGI. But an example of this would be boxing an AI in. So for example, when you box an AI in, you prevent it from communicating with other AIs, or you prevent it from accessing or communicating with other technologies, other software. So that would be one example of controlling AI by limiting its capabilities. Now, Nick Bostrom doesn't favor this. Others don't favor it as well. So there's a couple problems with this approach. One problem is that if we do this, if we limit the capabilities of AI, then these technologies will not be able to do what we want them to do, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. And there's definitely, because of that, there's definitely an incentive for AI companies to not do this, because it would put them at a disadvantage. It limits what AI can do. Another interesting problem here is that even if we try to limit its capabilities, AI, since it's a deep learning system, it can learn how to do things. AI could develop new capabilities on its own. It could learn new capabilities. So a different approach, and this is the one that Nick Bostrom favors, is value alignment. So this brings us back to what we were talking about earlier. So this is making sure that AI technologies have and pursue the right goals that fit with human values, right? So I was talking about this before. So eradicate cancer, but do it in a way that doesn't kill off human beings or harm human beings. And so you sort of like put those qualifications in to make sure that the AI does its job in a way that is consistent and aligns with human values. But there's lots of issues with this, tons of issues with this. As someone who specializes in ethics, I can tell you that what values there are, what values are more important than other values, how we interpret those values is a very difficult task. I mean, this is part of the thing that philosophers do. So one problem is, how do we decide what these values are? Can we all agree on what these values are? Can we all agree on which values may take precedent over other values? Should the tech companies just decide this stuff? Should it be open to public debate? Should government officials decide what these values are and how they are hierarchically? And even if we do this, how is the AI going to interpret those values? Like, for example, one value might be non-maleficence, meaning non-harm, don't do no harm. Well, that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, because as I was talking before, harm can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. How is AI going to interpret this? Can we control that interpretation? What is the right interpretation? So a lot of issues here. And then another problem that I mentioned before is that there could be unforeseen bad means through which AI achieves the goal. So maybe the goal is a good goal, but the way it achieves it may have some bad consequences or may not align with our values. So another example of this might be, okay, let's say we have an AI, it's a company, and it says, okay, make all humans happy. That sounds pretty good. Maximize overall happiness in the world for human beings. Sounds like utilitarianism. So a utilitarian AI that tries to maximize overall happiness for human beings. Sounds like a pretty good goal. But let's say the AI thinks about this and says, okay, the most efficient way of doing this is to take all humans and plugging them into an experience machine like the Matrix virtual reality, where they're just pumped with chemicals and given fake experiences that just makes them happy all the time. That's probably not what we want. That's probably not the means to that goal that we would want. All right, so I've talked about the control problem and a version of the control problem, which we would call the alignment problem or the values alignment problem. And hopefully it's clear now how it's a significant problem or a serious problem, and how resolving that problem can be quite difficult. In the chapter, I haven't covered this. I'm not going to cover this, but Nyholm does talk a little bit about how I think ChatGPT is trying to, or OpenAI is trying to resolve this problem by developing an independent AI that's going to determine the values and interpret the values that will constrain regular AI. Of course, this might just push the problem back, as you might see, but they're trying to do something. I guess that's the point here. In any case, I want to briefly talk about something a little bit different, which is the issue of AI hype. So recently, starting in 2023, and it's still going on today, you see a lot of, or some people within the AI world and other thinkers kind of giving like doomsday kind of scenarios and maybe being overly dramatic. Of course, they wouldn't say that. I mean, this is a controversial thing to say. But the issue now that arises is whether this AI hype, as you might call it, talking about the existential risks of AI, diverts attention away from more pressing issues. So some people have said that this AI hype distracts us from issues that we really need to be focusing on that are more immediate. Issues like, and this raises other issues, other ethical issues for AI. So data theft, the rise of synthetic media, job displacement, environmental harm. So we're hearing a lot about how data centers can harm the environment, concentrations of power. So, the owners of the AI technologies may become incredibly powerful with wealth, and then the outcomes of all that. So there's all these other issues that are important, and it's worth saying that we shouldn't be, completely distracted by these other problems that we've been talking about.